guys, so we continue from where we ended yesterday on variables. So why are variables so important in programming? So as the name suggests, variables, which means varying, changing. So variables is usually used to store changing data or varying data. It enables us to be able to remember and name something. Remember where a particular data is being stored without memorizing the actual memory address, because if you are to talk of memory address, it's usually a complex number which looks terrible, and you can't manage to remember all these addresses. So instead of you remembering these addresses, we reference them using variables. So for example, if I write something like double number is equal to, let's say, 7.9, what I've done here is called the initialization. So initialization, this is when you declare a variable and give it the initial value. You can see here on top we have a string name. This name is not initialized because at this point doesn't have any value. Another use of variables is for consistency and easy to change. Let's say I have this program here which just prints or talks about the life of this programmer called John. You can see here John, in this program John was referenced in many places. So if, let's say, this was the novel I'm writing, if the character change, instead of John it goes to Mark, which means have to manually go each and every line to change where there is John to put Mark. But what if this is 1,000 lines of code? You've already written some 1,000 lines of code. What can you do? That becomes so boring and so tiresome to change. So instead of doing that, I can easily create a name and assign it to John. I can easily assign it to John. Remember, it's a string. So instead where there is name, instead of putting the actual name, I can just put the name of my variable. So here I'll just divide this here. So I'll say plus name, then plus. And by the way, if you want to print a lot of stuff in the console, joining them, we join them in Java using a plus sign. So here as well, I can change, instead of assigning direct, I can put a name like that. Okay, so I can put a name even here. Like this. So if I had to run this program, let's compile the program and run, we see the results. So you can see here in the console I'm still getting there was a person called John. He was a renowned programmer. You can see all those names are being replaced. Now what if this character changes now? So instead of me changing all of those places, I can just come here and change from John to Mark on one place, and everywhere where this variable is used is going to change instantly. So it makes it a bit easy for reusable, to write a very reusable piece of code. And it's not always that all this data comes from there. We give it direct in code. What if you are logging the user? We always say get the value, the user will type the value and keep this value. So how can you keep this value, or how can you get value from the user using Java? So getting value from the user using Java, one of the ways by using a scanner class. So first of all, you go on top here of your main class. Okay, I'll go on top of my main class. Then you have to import this scanner class. So you have to say import java.util.scanner. So what we've just achieved here is that what we are saying is go in Java file, find a package called util, which is a short form for utility, and get a scanner class. So since a scanner is a class, for us to use this class, we have to create an object and use that object to access its members in that particular class. So first of all, I have to create this scanner class. So you start by the class name, which is scanner, then you give it any name, but it has to make sense. So in this case, we're going to say input is equal to new scanner, like that. So since this scanner is a class, you can see here it underlines, which means it has a constructor which at least expect some initial value. So the value we are going to pass here is called the system.in. So this system.in is one of expected parameter passed to a scanner class constructor for it to be getting a byte by byte of whatever the user is going to type. Next, we have to close this object, input.close. Without closing, it's not going to give you any error, but it's really a bad practice to do that. So all our code now we're going to write in this case, in this between the scanner object creation and the close. So first of all, I want to create a variable to store a name. So I'm going to say string name. So instead of me giving a name and initial value, I have to request the user to enter this name. So I'm just going to type system.out.print please enter your name, like this. Then next, have to write the code which will enable the user to type in a command line or in your terminal. So first I'm going to say name is equal to, so I want the name to store whatever value the user is going to type. So I'm going to say I'm using my input object dot next. So if it's a string, we say next line. If an integer, we say next int. If it's a double, next double, and so on. So we're going to say next int if it's an integer. If it's a double, well, we can say next double, and if it's a float, next float, and so on. So for now, we are only interested in string. That's why we are using dot next line. So at this point, the program will allow the user to enter the value. So I can print this value out, whatever the value is going to enter. I'm going to say your name is, then I'm going to plus my variable name, like that. So let's run the program, we'll see what it is doing. So after running the program, you can see this line is not get printed because it's waiting for this line to execute, which waits for the user to type something. So I can come here, type my name like this, which is my real name, by the way. Then if I press enter, you can see your name is and the name which I have typed. So this is the one of the way in which you can reassign values or get values and store in your variable coming from the user. You first create your object of type scanner, then use that object to get the value you want. Then do whatever you want to do with the value, whether printing, whether in calculations. Then you close the input. I'm going to demonstrate another example on how you can use these variables and these values coming from the user. What I'm just going to do is ask a user to give me two numbers, then I will perform the addition of those numbers and print the results. So first I will need the three variables. First, to store my calculations, which is sum. Next is the first variable to store a first number. Third is the variable to store the second number. So all these I'm just going to do integer. So I'm going to say int sum for storing my calculated value, then int num1 to store my first number, and then int num2 to store my second number. Then next I'm going to ask the user to enter the first number. Then I'll use the object to get my first number. So I'm going to say my num1 is equal to input dot next int, like this. So after getting the first number, I'm going to ask the user again to give me the second number. So enter the second number. Then I'll get that number and store it in my variable. Like that. So after that, after I've gotten these two numbers, now I can perform my calculation. So I'm going to say sum should be equal to num1 plus num2. So after this line, sum will contain the summation of these two numbers, and I can lastly print these out. So the sum, or let me say just the results, is then plus sum. That's all I have to do. Let me try to run the program here. We see together what we got. So after my program was run, it waits for me to enter the first number. You can see the cases blinking here. So I'm just going to say maybe 12. Then it also requests me to enter the second number. I'm going to say 3. What could be the answer? So the answer has to be 15 if the calculations are correct. So you can see here I'm getting the result is 15. So you can perform different things. You can perform mathematical computation. You can write a story using the idea of printing, variables, and data type. So that's all about variables and data type for today. Next time we're going to continue starting from control structures, which are if statement and switch cases. See you next.